U.S. Marine and his German Shepherd escape at midnight after overhearing sister-in-law's plot. Footprints stitched across the Spokane snow like a message only the night could read. Daniel Harper moved fast anyway, hip screaming, breath ghosting, Titan tight to his knee. 10 minutes earlier, he'd heard it. Cassandra's whisper under the hum of the fridge. A sentence that didn't sound like family. File the report. Unfit. We take control. Then a second voice on the speaker clipped an official promise to expedite. A drawer slid. Paper rustled. Something metallic tapped the counter twice. Like a signal. Daniel backed away before names spilled. He'd seen ambushes start with softer sounds. In the hallway, a photo lay face down. Glass spidered. On the table, a manila envelope smelled of cold ash. Titan sniffed, hackles rising, then pointed at the back door as the house lights flickered at exactly 12:03. Power cut, then back. Test run. Outside, the street looked scrubbed clean, except for a single set of wide tire tracks glistening under the lamp. No neighbors at windows, no engines idling. Only the far click of a crosswalk and the sharp tick of Daniel's watch. He palmed a faded bus map, felt a thin brass key taped behind it. A key he hadn't taped there. Who else had handled his things? Why now? He squeezed Titan's harness. The shepherd leaned forward, nose carving the wind, choosing alleys Daniel hadn't planned, steering left when his memory said right, as if the dog could smell a line being drawn around them. Somewhere south, a roadside diner threw a warm neon halo against old cedar. He could picture it without knowing why. Maybe he'd seen the sign years ago through the rain. Perhaps some part of him had saved it for this exact night. If you've ever felt a house go quiet before trouble speaks, tell me where you're watching from. Think loyalty should never be managed like a file. Hit subscribe. Stay with us. What's taped to that key may change everything. Late November pressed Spokane under heavy skies, the scent of damp pine lingering along alleys, where puddles filmed with thin ice. In Lincoln, a weathered two-story sagged gently, cedar siding silvered by rain, porch boards groaning when the wind shouldered the rail. Daniel Harper, 47, lived there, a former Marine whose body carried desert miles inside aching joints. Sleep came in shallow drops. Explosions returned as flashes that shook his ribs. He woke, counting breaths, naming nearby sounds until the present settled. Furnace click, fridge hum, distant plow scraping asphalt. A hip injury turned stairs into drills. Every landing demanded patience. Across each room moved Titan, 8 years old, black and tan, a German shepherd with a service dog's quiet focus and a soldier's poise. Daniel trusted that gaze more than locks. Bonded by months of missions, man and dog worked like practiced teammates, each anticipating the other's next move. Mornings began with ritual, because routine steadied storms. Coffee steamed inside a dented steel mug that warmed fingers stiff from a night of grinding muscles. Toast held butter when groceries allowed. Oats stood in on lean weeks. Only after Daniel ate did Titan receive breakfast, waiting by the back door until the harness clipped home. Outside, breath bloomed white under street lamps. Maples slicked the walk. The alley carried trash, diesel and wood smoke. Signals Titan cataloged without fuss. Feet found pace, heel to toe, never dragging, even when pain pressed behind bone. Neighbors waved with understanding, avoiding questions. Inside, the house persisted through flaw. Still, the mantel kept photographs. Parents laughing with iced tea, 2 boys holding trout, uniforms ready for ceremonies. A folded flag sat behind glass like a held breath. Daniel dusted that frame weekly, thumb tracing the corner as if checking a dressing. He worked odd jobs whenever joints permitted. A fence straightened beneath his level. Small repairs offered clean victories. Tighten, test, finish. Life rarely gave problems that tidy, yet tools in steady hands made sense out of stubborn things. Money stretched until it thinned. Benefits landed, then utilities swallowed them. He rationed medicine, swapped pills for stretching, and prescribed heat and salt baths spiked with cheap eucalyptus. Sleep broke easily. On fracturing nights, he read field manuals and paperbacks marked with pencil lines about endurance, duty and circles of trust. PTSD lived in corners, triggered by slamming doors or fireworks that arrived out of season. Headphones waited in a drawer near a deck of cards for basement retreats on loud weekends. On the fridge, block letters listed a routine because ink anchored hours: wake, stretch, brew, feed, walk, repair, breathe. Below that schedule sat an index card, copied from a corpsman years ago. Notice what is safe. Daniel repeated the phrase when sirens dopplered, or arguments rose outside the bar on 3rd. Titan noticed first. Before a delivery truck moaned to a stop, ears had already pointed. Before the hip protested, Titan matched stride to ease pressure, drifting left or right like a dancer guiding a partner. On the stairs, the shepherd slid a shoulder beneath Daniel's palm, a living rail with heartbeat reassurance. Children from 3 houses over learned the ritual he taught, asking permission, showing hands, and waiting for the dog to choose. Discipline mattered, because control created room for calm. The neighborhood saw more than its. Hill sent oatmeal cookies, wrapped in foil, when the first real snow stuck. Patel at the corner market kept parcels behind the counter, so nothing vanished from the stoop. Teen skaters nodded in respect, as they gave Titan a People sensed weight around the Harper place, even when gossip tempted easy stories. Daniel offered thanks, and maintained a distance that felt both courteous and warm. Storm warnings rolled through radios most afternoons. Crews salted arterials. Side streets glazed after dusk. He tracked outages inside a notebook, marking intersections that went dark early, rotating batteries, filling jugs, and checking a kerosene heater that could keep 2 rooms livable. Preparedness was not paranoia, it was a matter of learning from memory to. When the furnace hiccuped, vents closed in unused rooms, quilts came down from a cedar trunk, and Titan curled beside the chair like an ember. On calmer days, Daniel sat at the dining table, sanding a length of maple rescued from a salvage. Chisels and a small plane once belonged to his father, a patient maker who said wood rewarded those who listened. Daniel traced grain lines, until the fog inside his head parted. He imagined a narrow shelf for photographs, still boxed in the hallway, a place to lift family back onto walls that deserved more than stains. Titan slept nearby, paws twitching through dreams of tracking drills, tail thumping whenever Daniel cleared shavings from the. Evenings were layered with familiar sounds, the washer rattling, freight horns, snowmelt ticking from gutters, and bicycle chains cording rust. Dinners stayed simple: stew stretched with lentils, rice with onions, bread browned in a heavy pan. He ate at the counter under a single bulb, made a short list for tomorrow, then cleaned Titan's ears while the dog leaned into the care with a sigh that softened the room. Every object carried a job. Boots faced outward, ready. Keys hung on a nail. Dog bags lived in a pocket. Spare gloves sat by the thermostat. The pack stayed packed. Tourniquet, gauze, flashlight, map, lighter, snacks, paracord, a folded snapshot of a hill washed orange by desert sun, where a younger Daniel laughed with people who still called on birthday. He filed hope under equipment rather than wishes. If something failed, he adjusted, repaired, or replaced it before frustration took hold. A journal lay near the couch, its pages recording distances walked, pain levels, weather notes, and small victories, such as a morning without vertigo, or a confident stair descent. Some entries ended with gratitude lines addressed to no one in particular. The order did not fix everything. It reduced chaos enough to allow healing to try. Letters from agencies accumulated inside a shoebox, each promising assistance while asking for forms he had already made. He kept copies under binder clips, with dates highlighted, and phone numbers circled, and appointment reminders taped above the desk. Calls required patience. Hold music turned minutes into fog. Titan rested his head across Daniel's feet during those waits, as if pinning him gently to the present. On Sundays he visited the river, standing on the pedestrian bridge where ice bristled along pylons. He breathed pine, counted gulls, watched ferries nose along brown water, and let shoulders fall. The city looked almost kind from there, its edges softened by Walking home, he bought a paper cup of tomato soup from a cart near the library, because the vendor always added extra crackers for Titan. Inside the library, Daniel read local histories and wilderness guides, answering questions from kids drawn by the dog's calm demeanor. A librarian named Sarah kept aside a stack of trail maps the county planned to recycle, smiling when he promised to return them folded the same way. Back at the house, afternoon light thinned early. Shadows climbed walls he set the lamps low rather than inviting glare that would spike headaches. A heater ticked. Titan's breathing settled into slow waves. Phone alarms reminded me of medication times, so mistakes never led to borrowing tomorrow's strength. If friends texted, he replied with honesty, calibrated to truth and dignity. Doing okay carried weight without inviting pity. Even with solitude, he did not feel abandoned. Structure shaped quiet into something level. He practiced gratitude for ordinary mercies. Hot water, working boots, a neighbor's nod, a dog's steady presence. Winter, indifferent yet honest, made those mercies bright. Spokane held its breath under cloud and frost. Inside the bent house on a modest street, a Marine and his shepherd kept watch, rebuilding life one measured step at a time. Shingles lifted like curled fingernails, gutters sagged under ice, and paint peeled in ribbons whenever wind pressed its cold palm against the eaves. A damp blossom on the bedroom ceiling grew larger each day, its yellow turning brown. Daniel hauled an aluminum ladder from the shed, braced it against the fascia, and tested the angle and rungs, just as he once checked lines before a patrol. Titan planted himself at the base, tail low, ears tracking pressure, eyes locked on Daniel's boots. The hip throbbed. He told it to wait. He climbed with a bucket, shingles, a hammer, and a trowel, his breath fogging over the frosted grit. The city hummed beyond the maples, a plow scraping somewhere far off. He cut torn felt, scooped slush, and smoothed asphalt cement, pressing a patch with careful weight. Titan gave a small whine, asking for caution. Another seam gaped. He shuffled left. A gust curled under the eave and rattled the ladder. The bucket slid an inch, then another. Nails chimed downhill. He planted his heel, reached, and the shingle under his boot cracked. The roof lurched. His hip buckled. Hands clawed at the grit that would not hold. The bucket flipped. A hammer rang away. Gravity answered. He slid, boots scraping, palms burning, then pitched past the gutter into the yard. The world flashed white, air left in a hard grunt. For a few beats, sound vanished. Then Titan barked sharp, measured warnings and pressed warm weight along Daniel's ribs so he could breathe. Snow pricked his neck. Copper edged his tongue. Stars swarmed the corners of vision. Across the fence blinds twitched. A neighbor paused with groceries. Another peered around a gatepost. No one crossed the yard. Footfalls approached, hesitated, retreated. Daniel pushed to his elbow. The hip screamed. Shoulder throbbed. Wrist stiffened. Pride rose, faltered, cooled. Titan tucked close, a living brace. Together they crawled to the porch. He sat against the rail until his pulse loosened. Above, the torn patch flapped like a wet flag. Snow thickened, thin needles stitching a sky the color of pewter. "Okay, inside," he said, and Titan eased the door with his snout. Heat met them like an apology. He lowered into a chair and checked pupils with a finger's shadow. Nothing dislocated, nothing clean, either. Tablets, water, ice, patience. By evening, bruising mapped his side in dark galaxies. Movement narrowed to careful angle. He avoided clinics when stubbornness could prevail, but the pain persisted beyond his breathing drills. A rideshare took them to urgent care. Fluorescents buzzed. Forms asked the same questions as always. A nurse guided him to imaging. X-rays showed a hairline fracture near the old injury. Crutches. No ladders. Discharge papers crackled. At the desk, a printer spat out numbers that outpaced the balance he guarded like ration supplies. Copays multiplied. Back home, he built a nest of pillows on the couch, the lamp low, with ice wrapped in a towel that leaked onto the fabric. Bills gathered beside envelopes, promising help that always arrived with strings attached. Veteran insurance trimmed the edges of cost, never the core. Each notice carried a different voice. Past due letters shouted in red, itemized lines murmured in gray. He wrote figures on a legal pad, set them against deposits, and watched columns drift apart like rafts. Upstairs, the bucket under the ceiling stain kept time. Plunk, pause, plunk, Titan set his chin across Daniel's shin, a steady warmth that quieted the On the mantel, photographs glowed under the lamp. His mother is pouring iced tea, his father mid-joke, two boys with trout in a river, a folded flag rested behind glass, ribbon pinned below it. That cloth had come home with a weight beyond fabric. He touched the frame and felt his throat tighten. This place had held birthdays, quiet after funerals, apologies over late-night pie, and the hush that follows a storm. One winter, his father taught ladder manners. 3 points of contact, respect for gravity. That rule had never changed. In the reflection on the glass, he saw a man older than he felt and more tired than he admitted, still standing because the dog would not let him fall alone. Messages lit the phone. Bank, utilities, a supplier waiting for payment before releasing materials for a fence job. He negotiated extensions and offered dates he intended to meet, even if it meant selling tools. The streetlight turned falling snow into a slow tilting veil. Wind found loose tar paper and made a papery flap that scratched his nerve. Tomorrow, he would patch again from a scaffold if pride could bend enough to ask. Necessary beat perfect. Titan lifted one paw onto his knee, the gentle pressure that anchored him to now. Daniel set the flag in his lap and smoothed the crease. Names from sand winds and long nights came softly, companions returning to sit a while. He told the room he would not let the house go without a fight. Arithmetic argued. Repairs wanted receipts. Medicine wanted refills. Food wanted to buy. Heat wanted to be paid. He stared at the legal pad, until numbers blurred and pain put a pulse behind his eyes. The stain widened upstairs, brown rings climbing across eggshell paint he had rolled last spring, when hope felt simple. He closed his eyes and saw a rooftop under desert sun, a convoy nosing past a wash, Titan pacing a perimeter, dawn arriving like a quiet promise. Promise did not seal shingles, but it kept hands moving. Near midnight, the house settled, its joists creaking, pipes ticking, and furnace coughing. He sorted useful sounds from alarms the way training required. Useful, the timer reminds him to rotate the ice. Useful, Titan's breath steady as a tide. Useful, snow whispering against glass. Alarming, the drop in speed in the bucket. Alarming, the mind-looping failure as prophecy. He spoke to break the loop. We can fix this. We always fix things. Titan shifted closer until the calf warmed. Morning would bring supplier calls, discount bundles, and maybe the humility to borrow a scaffold. Morning would also bring the ledger and the ache, yet he trusted daylight more than night. Before sleep he returned the flag to its place, adjusted frames until the faces aligned, and saluted with 2 fingers, an old gesture that still felt right. Hold, he whispered, the word that steadied him when storms pressed close. The house answered with a single patient hum. Roots ran beneath the foundation into soil dark with melt. Memory lived there. Duty did too. Daniel would not surrender either. At dawn a thin sun pushed through pewter cloud, painting the frost a weak silver. He levered himself upright, strapped the brace and practiced the crutch swing until the rhythm hurt less than pride. Titan matched the new pace, shadowing each turn, waiting at thresholds, nosing lights on with a practiced bump. Daniel wrote a list. Call suppliers, price flash, ask Hill about a scaffold, check the thrift store for tarps and sell the extra sand. He pinned the page to the fridge with a flat river stone magnet and whispered, forward. Small steps still moved mountains in winter, slowly. Have you ever fought to save a place that felt like home? Share your story in the comments. Let's connect over what matters. The knock came just after noon. Thin sun sifting through frosted glass and turning dust into sparks. Daniel had finished logging payments for roof materials when Titan's ears lifted toward the door. A second knock followed, softer, almost apologetic. He eased weight onto the crutch, crossed the creaking hall, and opened the door to the cold. Nathan stood on the porch, tall in a wool coat that no longer fit across the shoulders. Thinning blonde hair wind-blown, weary blue eyes hovering between hope and exhaustion. Got a minute? He asked, a smile failing halfway. Come in before the heat leaves, Daniel said. In the kitchen, Nathan rubbed his hands near the vent and glanced at the ceiling stain, which was widening around the light. He tracked the bucket on the table, the ledger with stubborn columns, the envelopes waiting for courage. How bad? Manageable, Daniel said. What's going on? Nathan didn't touch the mug set down for him. He laced his fingers. The shop's hurting. Orders slowed. Suppliers want cash. And rent jumped. I took bridge loans. Cut hours. Sold scrap and refinanced the truck. Banks nod and ask for collateral. I don't have. Silence gathered with the fridge's hum. And Titan's steady breathing. I need help, Danny. Real help. You know I'm spread thin. I know. He studied the mantle photographs. The house holds equity. If we sell, I can pay off debt and secure a school contract due in the spring. After that I can stand on my own again. The words came like a draft through an unsealed window. Sell this place. It's too much space for one person, Nathan said. You could rent something smaller for a while. I'll cover the first and last month. Help you move, and keep Titan's needs handled. When the shop recovers, we'll look at another place together. It sounded reasonable, the way thin ice looks solid under a dusting of snow. Daniel set both hands on the counter and studied the floor, just as he once studied maps, seeking the hidden trap. He pictured rooms emptied, the hallway blank without photographs, bedrooms cleared of cedar trunks and quilts, his father's workbench dormant in a stranger's garage. What does Cass think? She thinks it's the smart move. A car door thudded. Titan padded to the window. Cassandra knocked with brisk certainty, cheeks bright from the wind, hair pinned neatly, eyes already measuring. She stepped in, unbuttoned a sleek coat, and turned to the room like an auditor. You don't need all this space, she said, voice cool, gaze passing over aging cabinets, patched counter and the stains spreading like a continent. Maintenance will bury you. A sale now means a clean break, and cash while the market still has a pulse. It means erasing them, Daniel said, nodding at the mantle. Our parents. Every mark they left. Memories travel, Cassandra replied. Walls don't sanctify love. Security requires choices. Nathan's shop keeps people working. That contract could hold 10 families above water through winter. Nathan flinched, as if each household had called at dawn. She isn't wrong, he said. Daniel sat, hip settling into its familiar burn. Titan pressed against his leg. He measured proposals not only by their text, but by their shadows. Selling might keep the business alive. Selling might also strand him rootless when storms returned. He asked for details because details build truth. Square footage, comps, broker fees, closing costs, taxes. Cassandra answered efficiently. Laptop open, tabs multiplying. The numbers made a kind of sense if you ignored everything that makes a house a home. Trim the shop instead, Daniel said. Sublet space, renegotiate terms, barter work for material, take repair jobs to keep cash moving. Keep this place while you try. I've tried, Nathan said, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Every day feels like bailing with a spoon while the boat laughs. The house is the only lever big enough. He's drowning, Cassandra said. This is a life ring. Titan's ears flattened. Daniel stroked the dog's neck until the tension eased. He heard his father on long drives. Never trade your foundation for a patch. The ledger argued louder. Medical bills climbed. Utilities leaned. Taxes waited. The roof begged. Pride costs more than lumber. Give me a night, he said. An agent has a buyer sniffing already, Cassandra replied. Cash investors don't linger. If we list this week, we can close before the deep freeze. He looked to Nathan, hoping for patience. Nathan's eyes were tired and pleading. I can't lose the shop, he whispered. It's the one thing that still feels like Dad's hands are guiding mine. That loosened something inside Daniel. He understood the feeling of clutching the last thread to someone gone, and how thin that thread can feel when pulled. He paced, counted his steps, tested his breath, then stopped at the window where the wind polished the street to a dull glass. Choices rarely arrive labeled as right and wrong. They arrive labeled as now and later, yours and ours, pain and different kinds of pain. He pictured Titan adjusting to a new address, a hallway without cedar, stairs without a familiar creak, neighbors who didn't yet know the handshake that makes skittish kids, and service dogs friends. He pictured the shop alive again, with orders stacked and invoices stamped as paid. Fine, he said, voice small in a room that had held so much noise. List it. Nathan closed his eyes. Cassandra shifted from argument to tempo. Papers appeared, signature flags fanned like bright leaves, disclosures lined in rows. Daniel read every line twice, then signed, each stroke tugging a thread from fabric he had been mending since life cracked. Titan leaned harder, a brace against the unseen tide. After they left, quiet settled in stages. Refrigerator click, furnace sigh, a branch tapping glass. Daniel lifted photographs one by one, wiping frames. He boxed his parents first, wrapping corners in old maps. He unscrewed the panel that held pencil marks, labeled it in block letters, and set it in a crate so he could bolt memory to whatever wall came next. Workbench drawers yielded ghosts, a carpenter's pencil stub, a square, a pocket knife. He kept the knife and waited for his breath to steady. Rooms thinned, echoes grew, pipes ticked, stairs creaked, heat retreated. By evening, empty shelves lined the hallway. Daniel ate standing up, then stacked boxes. Titan inspected each, then lay across the threshold. Night pressed its face to the windows. Daniel sat on the floor with the dog's head on his knee. Selling meant survival for one branch of the family, and surrendering rooms that had held laughter, anger, recovery and rest. He watched the snow and tried not to hear the part of himself that called the decision a betrayal. Debt and desperation had won. Tomorrow, a sign would bloom on the lawn like a flag. He stood and walked from room to room, touching the trim, counting steps, and naming each space aloud as if the house deserved a roll call before transfer. By the back door he found a scuff from Titan's first winter here and smiled despite himself. Phones buzzed with follow-ups from the agent. Cassandra texted bullet points. Nathan sent a single line that hurt and helped at once. "I'll make this worth it." Daniel typed, "Do that," and put the device face down. He labeled boxes with thick marker, kept the flag on the mantle for one last night, and swept sawdust from the basement, as a small courtesy to whoever came next. On the porch he breathed in the scent of pine and diesel. He pressed his palm to the siding, and thanked the place for the shelter it provided, when storms were loud and mercy felt scarce. Inside, Titan waited by the stairs, patient, steady, ready to follow wherever the path led. Quiet. Tonight, Nathan's subdivision looked rehearsed. White siding, clipped lawns, matching mailboxes catching weak winter sun. Daniel stepped from the truck, hip braced, Titan close, and took in the porch, coated to smile by a seasonal wreath. Inside, lemon cleaner overruled stew and coffee. Shoes lined the entry in pairs. A bench swallowed backpacks. An analog clock ticked with diligent optimism. Nothing sagged. Nothing argued with the weather or time. Order soothed guests and scolded improvisers. Daniel felt like both. Titan sat, observant and ready. Nathan pulled him into a quick hug that mixed gratitude with hurry. "The kids are excited," he said. They made a sign, crayon letters stretched across butcher paper. "Welcome Uncle Daniel and Titan." Lily, 9, bounded forward in purple socks and quick braids. Jacob, 7, followed with solemn care, one hand hiding a biscuit. Titan's ears rose, tail low. The biscuit found a respectful jaw, accepted like a handshake. Jacob stood taller, as if sworn into a small unit. Daniel tapped 2 fingers to his brow, sealing the pact. Cassandra came from the kitchen in a fitted sweater, hair smooth, expression half polite, half audition. "We prepared the guest room," she said. "Extra blankets in the closet, towels on the top shelf. Please keep the dog's gear in the garage, so the house doesn't smell like a kennel." The smile stopped before warmth. She handed Daniel a wooden bowl of greens and added, "You should eat less, stay active." The words wore health, carried judgment. He answered with courtesy, because courtesy helps maintain peace when walls are already strained. Upstairs, the guest room resembled a catalog spread, gray quilt, twin lamps, a framed mountain that could have been anywhere. Daniel stacked folded clothes in cleared drawers, then paused while the hip argued its case. Nathan pointed at a tidy shelf and a window with obedient blinds. "Plenty of space," he said, hopeful and harried at once. Downstairs, Cassandra boxed Daniel's rucksack, medical kit and field journal into a bin labeled Miss. Titan's leash, once hanging near the kitchen in Spokane, disappeared beneath extension cords and rollerblades in the garage. A clipboard above the hook rail set rules in tidy bullet points. Dawn rebuilt routine inside unfamiliar angles. Daniel stretched before stairs demanded compromise, then walked Titan around the cul-de-sac, while sprinklers misted frosted lawns like confused ghosts. Motion lights popped on, startled by their quiet patrol. A jogger floated past under earbuds, while an app called Splits. Garbage trucks lifted bins with hydraulic sighs. The neighborhood moved by schedule. Deviation felt suspect even at first light. He kept pace anyway, because keeping pace costs less than explaining pain to strangers. Breakfast happened at the bar while cartoons murmured from the family room. Lily slipped crumbs to Titan whenever Cassandra rinsed bowls. Jacob started a logbook of canine achievements, filling it with block letters and hand-drawn metal. Daniel enforced protocols gently. Ask first, show hands. Wait, then stroke the collar to the tail. Titan became a teacher and a mirror, absorbing the children's rhythm while anchoring his own. The dog claimed a square of rug near the pantry, posted himself there, and watched the house like a checkpoint. Afternoons brought school pickups in a crossover scented with apple shampoo and the dust of cracker crumbs. Daniel rode shotgun and practiced stillness while maps whispered alternate routes in habits that refused dismissal. After drop-offs, he helped in the garage where overflow from Nathan's shop colonized one wall. Clamps hung in disciplined rows above a bench powdered with ambition. Bills waited beside spreadsheets. Nathan talked faster when tools ran, praising efficiencies, sketching pitches, bargaining with calendars. Between cuts he apologized for asking, for timing, for everything. Daniel kept answers short so nothing cracked. Cassandra's gaze skimmed his limp as if calculating cost. She objected to boots by the door, fur on the upholstery, and the way the hallway jammed when both children wanted hugs at the same time. We're preserving hygiene, she said, spritzing fabric, moving coasters 2 millimeters, wiping a countertop already clean. When Daniel cooked stew one evening, she suggested grilled chicken without salt and handed an article on portion control. The headline praised discipline, the subtext whispered contempt. He rinsed the pot and let the moment pass. Nights pressed heavier than the quilt. The bed held him like a polite acquaintance, not a He wrote about the difference between shelter and belonging, about how a roof can cover a body without warming a life. Titan slept by the door, head on paws, counting every footfall. Through the wall came adult arguments wrapped in euphemism. Margins, refinancing, deadlines, optic. Those words skimmed feeling. While avoiding blood, Daniel traced hairline cracks across the ceiling and listened for the house's breath until his own matched it. The children stitched brightness across hours nobody else wanted. They built blanket forts around Titan and read explorers' tales while Daniel drew treasure maps with arrows pointing to snacks. Lily's hugs arrived at full velocity. Jacob's awe came quietly, a steady look learning the shape of courage that doesn't shout. When Cassandra found a tuft of fur on the sofa, she performed exile with a lint roller and a lecture about boundaries. Daniel brushed Titan on the patio, gathered the fluff and carried it to the bin like contraband. Sunday brought Cassandra's parents with perfume that behaved like the weather. Questions arrived as statements. You'll enjoy a smaller place. It's wonderful you can help with pickups. Service animals shed, right? Daniel smiled politely, then retreated early to help Jacob build a model jet. The boy asked about runway signal. Daniel taught precise motions learned near dim airstrips. Later Jacob used them from the hallway, saluting with a lights-out flourish that rescued an evening frayed by numbers and pride. Lily taped another drawing to the fridge. Titan saves the... He missed the cedar bench in Spokane, the way wood held the room like a hymn, and the map of creeks that told him where he stood, even with eyes closed. Here corners felt labeled and rented. His duffel was never fully unpacked. A house can host and still refuse to welcome. The difference hides in small vetoes. Which chair he should choose, which shelf must stay empty, which stories require trimming so nobody feels obligated to feel. He measured words like screws, careful not to strip threads or shear head. One Saturday, while Nathan took the kids for skate helmets, Cassandra staged a reorganization. Daniel's gear was consolidated into 2 plastic totes, with lids taped and the contents inventoried in a spreadsheet. She smiled without softness. "This will help everyone function," she said, then glanced at his waist. "Remember, light dinners." Gratitude couldn't erase advice shaped like disdain. Later he found Titan's leash buried under chrome scooters. Dust coated the clip. Anger rose, then ebbed to calculation. Maintain peace, preserve the bond, and store strength. He slipped the leash into his jacket like a quiet promise. Evenings settled into tidy rhythms that didn't match his own. Lily practiced simple scales. Jacob lined action figures in parade formation for Titan to inspect. Nathan hid in spreadsheets longer. Cassandra drafted posts that displayed light while muting strain. Daniel washed dishes, set out lunches, and stepped outside with the dog for laps around the block, where porch bulbs cast friendly circles that stopped at the sidewalk. He whispered to Titan about rivers, forests, and towns that forgive arrivals who bring effort more than answers. He carried himself like a guest because that role asked less than the heart demands. He left spaces cleaner than he found them, and apologized for the noise of pain. When sleep stalled, he stood in the kitchen, drinking water under the stove clock's glow, reading clipboard rules while the refrigerator hummed like a far generator. The house breathed in measured counts. He breathed on uneven beats. Titan synchronized both, keeping vigil until breath aligned and thought softened. Neighbors waved from driveways polished by shovels. HOA notices arrived with bullet points about bins and fence. A patrol car coasted by once, slow enough to read plates. Daniel nodded at everyone and told Titan to heel. Courtesy smoothed rooms, though never softened edges. He learned which clerk liked service dogs, which bakery wrapped plain buns for children who shared, and which park allowed quiet training away from playgrounds. Small maps replaced old ones, each mark temporary, written in pen. He kept a list taped inside the rucksack: job leads, supply stores, clinics with sliding scales, shelters that accepted animals. The list grew while options thinned. Cassandra marked a move-out date on the family calendar in neat blue ink. Daniel pretended not to see it and tightened discipline. Instead, drills at dawn, stretches at lunch, slow stares at dusk. He checked Titan's paws for cracks and rubbed balm along toughened pads. The dog leaned into care like thanks shaped in fur and bone. Under porch lights, snow sometimes fell in hush, softening edges, turning every house into a car. Daniel stood beside Titan and tried to believe the picture. He could admire order without mistaking it for welcome. He could honor help without calling it home. He carried that distinction like a small, steady flame, guarded with both palms against drafts that arrived as suggestions, compliments or side-eyed smiles. Titan pressed his shoulder to Daniel's knee as if to say the map still held arrows. Ever felt out of place where you should belong? Drop a comment. Your experience could inspire someone. Midnight pressed against polished cabinets, while the refrigerator thrummed like distant armor. Daniel lay awake in the guest bed, pain lighting up his hip, while Titan curled near the door with his ears aimed toward the hall. A whisper slid under the hum, syllables trimmed to hide intent. He sat up, touched the dog's collar, and felt tension pulsing through him. Another whisper followed, colder and deliberate, like knives wrapped in cloth. He rose without switching on a lamp, and drifted beside the stairs where shadows guarded corners. Cassandra stood in the kitchen, with her phone on speaker, screen face down beside a thick folder. "He's a risk," she said, voice quiet and triumphant. "Declare him unfit, take his pension, assume guardianship, consolidate distributions, divert medical approvals." A male voice answered through static. "Professional patients pressed into legal starch. We can expedite after the evaluation, document incidents, emphasize volatility, record falls, capture non-compliance." Cassandra tapped the folder, aligning pens like small bayonets. Nathan's shoes squeaked on tile. "This feels wrong," he murmured. Cassandra didn't pause. "It's necessary. The shop sinks every day. This lever keeps us afloat. He'll receive supervision, structure, and strict medication routines. We remove strain, reduce risk, convert assets into stability." Silence grew teeth. Nathan exhaled. I don't want to hurt him. You're protecting him, she said, and protecting us. The call ended. She closed the folder and smiled without warmth. Daniel eased back into darkness, pulse thudding, breath counting beats like marching steps. Titan rumbled, a quiet growl, held on a short leash by training and faith. Staying meant surrendering voice, freedom, dignity. He pictured locked cabinets, confiscated papers, a leash buried under scooters, and appointments imposed by strangers reading from scripts. Decision hardened inside the bone. Survival required motion. He inventoried silently. Cash on hand, thin. Options, thinner. Sell small valuables fast. He opened his rucksack, slid the field journal beneath the lining, tucked the service notes behind the map, wrapped the credentials inside socks, and then rolled the bundle tight. Titan watched, tail barely moving, eyes steady. Daniel whispered, quiet, and the dog settled into stillness, learned on long hot nights far from winter. In the garage he found a folding knife in a tackle box, a clean blade kept sharp out of habit. He wrapped it in cloth, pocketed a wristwatch his father had worn beside mountain rivers, and slipped both into a pouch. Under the water heater he had taped an envelope months earlier, a rainy day stash born of reflect. He counted bills by touch, then split the stack so setbacks couldn't ruin everything at once. Back inside, he moved through rooms like smoke, collecting bandages, antiseptic wipes, pain medication, antacids, antihistamines, a spare brace, and adhesive tape. He folded everything into a flat kit that could slide under a jacket without printing. At the sink he portioned dry food into sealed bags, slid them beside jerky, peanuts, raisins, tea, electrolyte powder, and instant oatmeal. A small bottle of fish oil for the dog was placed in the side pocket. He filled 2 plastic canteens and set them near the back door for a quick grab. He rolled an emergency blanket around Titan's vest and added booties to protect paws from salt, every item purchased hours against winter. Digital footprints demanded pruning. He powered the borrowed tablet, wiped the search history, disabled location services, deleted autofill cards, and signed out-of-synced accounts. On the phone he silenced voicemail, erased recent calls, cleared messages, and turned off Bluetooth. Essential contacts were written on a paper card, tucked beneath the insole of his left boot. Paper beats batteries when batteries die. Routes unfurled across memory. Spokane Terminal. Gray buses fanning west and south. He let the map live in muscle rather than bright screen. Veterans learned to walk the world with quiet maps. Titan had trained for stealth in crowded bases. That discipline still lived in the way his paws touched ground without sound. He needed liquid cash. A pawn shop near the river took tools and watches without many questions. He wrote down opening hours and alternate dealers in case one clerk grew curious. Before dawn he would slip out, sell the knife and watch, buy bus fare, collect a cheap prepaid phone, and keep moving until street names changed into something Cassandra couldn't plausibly claim. Redford whispered from an old memory, a diner sign glowing over cedar smoke, a pencil circle around a crossroads scribbled during a long drive years back when he still believed detours healed. He prepared contingency. If confronted he would keep his voice calm, deny nothing, promise updates from a clinic, then leave. If authorities appeared, he would present service documents, prove current care for Titan, cite transit provisions for trained assistance animals, and request counsel. If forced to split, he had a temporary foster contact from a handler network, someone who owed him a favor and loved shepherds enough to drive at dawn. Titan nudged his knee. Daniel knelt, pressed his forehead to the dog's, and breathed until rage cooled into focus. Heel, cover, stay, he whispered, running through silent commands. The shepherd matched each posture without a sound. They had survived worse than a kitchen conspiracy. They would survive. He lay back on the bed fully dressed, boots on, rucksack staged beneath the window with a leash coiled on top. The house creaked, pipes clicked. Somewhere, a digital watch marked the hour. Daniel counted 10 breaths, then rose, replaced the guest room bulb with a dimmer spare so that anyone checking later would think he was still asleep, and stuffed a towel along the door gap to hide drafts and smell. He cracked the window to the roof over the mudroom and tested the drop zone with a yard of paracord. Titan would jump first, Then he would slide down the slope, drop to the grass, and cross the side yard behind the hedges. Staying meant losing everything. Leaving promised pain now. Choice he chose. He wrote Lily and Jacob's names on a scrap, tucked it inside the journal, and promised the heir he would call from someplace safe. He hid the scrap deeper, because tenderness should travel concealed when danger watches. 2 hours remained in the night. He returned to the kitchen, opened his wallet, removed one insurance card, and left it on the table where Nathan would see proof that he had not vanished without thought. He placed a photo of the brothers at the river beside it. Not farewell, only a reminder of water that keeps moving, long after boys grow into complicated men. He pocketed the rest and scanned the counters for anything that could betray direction. Upstairs, the ducks moaned. Cassandra's folder waited near the fruit bowl, smug in its crisp corners. He did not touch it. Knowledge already cut deep. He eased back to the room, scratched Titan's chest and whispered their route, once more like a prayer made of verbs. Slip, cross, cut, climb, hop, run, board, ride, work, heal, call. The tail tapped once, soft as a violin. He sealed the rucksack, shouldered the weight, and listened until uncertainty quieted. Then he killed the lamp, let darkness thicken, and sat with the dog watching the window pale. Dawn would carry them out. Hope would carry them further. At 1 a.m., the house held its breath, while Daniel eased the window above the mudroom and signaled Titan with 2 fingers. The shepherd slipped through first, paws landing without a scrape, breath puffing and vanishing into the Spokane dark. Daniel followed, boots whispering across frost, then crouched to listen. No hinges, no alarms, only the far hush of tires beyond the cul-de-sac. He clipped the leash, not for control, but for a message. Together, snow softened every edge, muffling their progress as they threaded hedges, cut behind 3 yards, and passed a chain-link gap mapped earlier. Daniel kept weight forward to spare the hip, exhaled on effort, inhaled on release, counting sets of 10 to steady rhythm. Titan angled for shadow, ears high, nose reading currents carrying wood smoke, dacer, and a fox's thin trail. A porch light blinked out as if the city had agreed to look away. They reached Maple, where plows had pushed slush into ridges that hid ice. Daniel shortened his stride, let the dog set the pace, and avoided glittering patches. Past the school, a flag snapped against its pole. His watch said. Snowflakes ticked against Daniel's lashes as they skirted a silent church, its steps dusted white and its hymnboard still set for the previous Sunday. He breathed through the ache and pictured Redford, not as escape, but as a room with a door he could close without apology, a place where Titan's nails might click across wood that didn't judge. The image steadied his stride, the way a compass steadies course when clouds erase stars on winter nights. Cold, drilled fingers despite gloves. The brace pinched, breath rasped once, then settled as training returned. He reviewed contingencies while landmarks rolled by, a mural of salmon leaping, a shuttered bakery, a hardware window reflecting 2 figures moving as one. Silence between them carried years of practice. They dropped into a service alley to avoid a salted intersection where trucks gathered, tires crushed ice. Daniel kept his eyes moving, left, right, back, forward, up, habit, not pan. On the overpass, wind knifed under his jacket until he cinched the straps. Below, a lone semi rolled west. He pictured that road as a river toward a diner's neon promise. The terminal glowed ahead, its glass and sodium lamps casting a pale orange glow. The clock read. Daniel loosened the leash and let Titan scout 5 feet. Doors side open, exhaling warm air flavored with bleach and coffee. Plastic chairs lined the room. A vending machine flickered. 2 kids slept near a vent. An attendant paged a delay in a voice worn thin. Daniel bought water and a small bag of kibble. The clerk glanced at Titan's vest, nodded, and said nothing. They sat near an exit facing the yard so he could watch bays without twisting. He traced routes south and west until Redford sat in. Overnight connections stacked uncertainty like crates. He rubbed his knee and waited. A man in a quilted jacket and grease-scarred cap stood by a coffee urn whose drip sounded like rain. Gray beard, broken knuckles, old injuries in his stance. He watched Titan with respect, earned the hard way. Well trained, he said. Daniel smiled once. He saved my life more than once. The man lifted his cup. I know the feeling. Jack Riley, he said. Long haul. Ex-Marine before that. I roll south in 20 if dispatch behaves. You look like you're choosing a hard road. Daniel weighed candor. Heading to Oregon. Jack's eyes narrowed. Precise. Redford? Daniel blinked. How'd you guess? Jack shrugged. Cedar and pancakes at this hour means a diner that opens before dawn. They moved toward the window where yard lights haloed exhaust. Titan leaned into Daniel's leg, then studied Jack without a sound. Jack angled his palm. Titan sniffed and accepted. I can drop you near Redford. Jack said. My route skirts it by 5 miles. Shoulders are generous, traffic light. The company allows riders with waivers. No cost. Keep your cash. Daniel studied the offer like a corridor. Motive. Jack had a veteran's cadence, and an economy that said he understood decisions shaped at dull thumb. The frayed cap and battered thermos matched unshowy kindness. Why help? Daniel asked. Jack sipped lukewarm coffee. I've been there. The words reached deeper than advice ever could. They named a map most people never read. Pain softened without leaving. Trust thawed. Daniel nodded. We're grateful. Jack tipped his head toward base. No sleeper till after the checkpoint. But the passenger seat is warm, and I carry a spare blanket. They crossed the doors into the loading yard where the air smelled of exhaust and iron. The cab waited, white with a faded stripe along the door. Jack offered a hand up the step without pity. Titan took the ladder, settled in the footwell, eyes sweeping mirrors. Jack clicked belts, checked gauges and rolled out. City blocks slid by in orange and blue, snow drifting across lanes, bridges arcing like Daniel held the thermos, sipped coffee, and let the engine's drone scrub Cassandra's whispers. Jack kept talking lightly. Fuel passes. The Idaho diner with cherry pie. He asked nothing pinning, offered nothing prime. Titan dozed in shifts, snout on Daniel's boot, tail flicking with each change in pitch. Green signs counted miles. Pines crowded closer, branches powdered with new flakes. Daniel flexed fingers to ease stiffness, then rested his palm on Titan's ribs, tracking a heartbeat steady as a metronome. Out here, the night had room. The cab carried 3 lives that understood weight. They crossed into Oregon while darkness held. Jack pointed toward a stand of cedar beyond a turnout. Wind shifts there. Watch for black ice on the downslope. Daniel nodded and stored the warning. Many offer tips to display knowledge. Jack offered survival in plain language, the currency of those who return from the edges. Near dawn, a curve revealed a dim halo on the horizon. Not city glare. Something humbler. Redford, Jack said as if naming a friend. The road leveled, then slid through a valley where chimneys wrote smoke. The truck eased onto the shoulder at a broad apron of gravel. He set the brake, looked at Daniel and extended his hand. You'll be okay. You know how to move. Daniel shook, feeling the clasp of shared work. Thank you, he said, meaning shelter and the chance. Titan hopped down, landed shore, and turned a quick circle to read wind and scent. Daniel followed, boots crunching. Jack leaned out the window. Diner opens in 20. Try the cedar-smoked bacon. Tell Ellen the old man in the white rig sent you. The truck pulled away with a friendly honk, dwindling into red dots swallowed by snow. Road grit bit Daniel's cheeks. The air smelled of wood and something faintly sweet. A neon sign down the slope flickered through branches. Not bright yet, but awake. He adjusted the rucksack, touched Titan's ear and set off toward the glow, each step lighter than any he had taken in weeks. When has a stranger's help changed your life? Share in the comments. Let's celebrate kindness. Redford woke like a wood stove, heat moving through cedar and smoke, until the town exhaled. Shopkeepers brushed steps and flipped signs. Daniel stood with Titan, breath in ghost plumes, watching a neon fork blink alive. Mayfield's diner smelled of coffee, but the first thing that met him was a woman's measuring gaze. Ellen Carter wore a flannel and a widowed ring. She looked from Daniel to the shepherd, as if weighing character. You hungry? Also handy. She poured coffee, slid 2 eggs, and tipped her chin toward the ceiling. Roof leaks above room 3. When snow turns to rain, hoods rattle, the back door swells when the mill wind swings across. Fix those, and you'll have a bed and 2 meals. Cash Fridays. Deal. She pushed a key. No drama. No lies. No drinking on shift. The dog stays if he behaves. He behaves. Titan thumped once and went still. Room 3 held a narrow bed, a carved desk, and a window over an alley where barrels crouched like sleeping bears. He lined tools and climbed to the roof with flashing and tar. He patched seams, cleared gutters, tightened hoods, and planed the door until it closed with a polite click. Ellen checked repairs by feel, paid and folded bills, and set down stew that tasted like patience. Word traveled. 2 volunteers from the hall asked about ladder safety at the church. A teacher wanted the shelves leveled. A woman with a sinking porch asked for a brace. Before the thaw, Daniel scheduled with the pacing of someone who knows what happens when promises outrun daylight. He kept a small pad and never wrote more than he could finish. Between tasks, Titan learned the diner's rhythm, sliding around stools and finding the distance where nervous hands needed something solid. A young father with stitches paused when the dog rested a chin on his knuckles. A woman wearing a Vietnam bracelet traced Titan's ear and exhaled. Ellen watched and said nothing, just refilled her coffee and let the space hold. During the dinner lull, the librarian arrived, hat dusted with flurries, eyes bright. Sarah Wells. We need a Saturday program that teaches something real. You know about staying alive when things go sideways? Ellen answered. He knows. Sarah set trail maps and forms on the counter. I'll handle permission and insurance, if you handle skill. I can do. Saturday brought boots, hoodies, sarcasm, curiosity, and 2 wary parents in the back. Daniel laid out a compass, a mirror, a metal cup, duct tape, paracord, and a bandana, then asked about problems their valley might encounter: being lost on a trail, a truck in a ditch, a friend hurt while sledding, lightning at the lake, and phones being dead during a cold snap. Together they solved each without gadgets. Titan modeled calm while 3 students shouted out the steps, and 2 forgot to breathe. By lunch the room had a new sound, confidence whispering to itself. Old veteran Harold claimed the corner stool near the register like a post. His cap carried patches, rubbed smooth by decades. His silences knew what to keep. You carry weight, right? He told Daniel. Doesn't spill onto people who didn't sign up for it. He played cribbage with Ellen and taught Lily how to count pay. When weather trapped plows and tempers rose, Harold whistled something from long ago, and the diner remembered to breathe. As snow retreated, the palette shifted from white and slate to fur green and wet brown. Daniel's limp remained, yet the angle changed. Pain advised instead of dictating. He slept longer, woke clearer, and found his hands closing cabinets more gently. In the window of room 3, he placed a photo of 2 boys holding trout. Below it, he tucked the folded flag not as a shrine or a burden, simply as truth carried forward. One evening, Sarah invited him to a circle at the library, where there were no microphones, only chairs, tea, and questions that nobody asks over a counter. He spoke about sand, heat, radio checks, loss, and the way home can feel too quiet if nobody teaches you how to hear it again. Harold offered a line about daylight being a stubborn healer. Ellen admitted that she sometimes kept the oven on after closing, because warmth helps keep certain memories from knocking. Stories fit together like kindling. The diner became a hinge on which days breakfasts were held for loggers, teachers, a pastor, a mail carrier, a mechanic, and 2 painters, who bartered sketches for pancakes. Lunch rushed, evenings slowed. Daniel learned irregular orders by heart, and how to let talk bend without breaking. Titan made rounds like a chaplain. Ellen's door stayed ajar. On Thursdays she matched the register to the ledger and smiled at a memory only she carried. She told Daniel about her husband's laugh, the kind that made strangers turn. This place outlived him, she said, because he taught it how to stay. Daniel understood. He had been trying to teach his life the same lesson. By the first honest thaw, Redford knew him. The postmaster asked about Titan's training. A crossing guard waved him over to meet a class that cheered when he said wave. The hardware owner set aside a chisel set because tools drift toward hands that will respect them. On a Sunday, a man pressed a small envelope into his palm, a thank you for showing a teenager how to build an emergency kit from things already in the He no longer counted breaths to survive the night. He counted tasks completed, names learned, miles walked beside a dog, who seemed larger under Redford light. He had believed escape meant running from fire. The town taught a finer truth. Escape can mean arriving where your work meets a need shaped like you. He belonged, not because pity held a door, but because effort moved hinges that had been stiff for too long. On a mild evening, scented with pitch, Ellen flipped the sign, wiped the last table and pointed upstairs. Go sleep, she said. Tomorrow brings crews, and crews bring stories. Titan had already climbed 2 steps and paused. Daniel scratched the shepherd's neck, and felt gratitude lift through his chest. Thank you, he told the room, the town, the people who made space. From the landing, he watched Sarah lock the library and wave. Harold shuffled past, saluted with 2 fingers, and promised a rematch at cribbage. Steam rose from vents, with a smell like cedar tea. Room 3 waited, with clean sheets, and a window cracked, enough to let winter admit it, was still present, only less bossy. Daniel set the photo on the desk, slid the flag beneath, and sat until his shoulders loose. Titan curled at the door, a barrier and a welcome. Outside, Redford hummed, not loudly or shallowly, just confidently. He listened, closed his eyes, and the sound folded around him the way a good blanket does, when someone who understands cold hands it across your arms. He wasn't a bird, he was part of the work. He belonged. Morning would bring lists, ladders, laughter, and the quiet discipline of service. In that cadence, he heard his life reassembling piece by piece, steady as breath, warm as bread, faithful as Titan's watch at every threshold again. Snow thickened until Redford blurred to charcoal and pearl. Street lamps cast halos, while every step spoke in soft crunches. Daniel salted the stoop, propped the diner door, and let steam and coffee drift into the night. Titan held the threshold like a furred sentry, ears pricked, tail low, studying flakes as if they were coded signals. The bell chimed again. Daniel looked up and saw Nathan in the glow, Lily on one side, Jacob on the other, hats askew, lashes jeweled with cold. Exhaustion hollowed his brother's face. Regret bent his mouth. He carried no suitcase, only a paper bag, and a look Daniel recognized from mirrors after complex campaigns. Lily launched first, coat unzipped, cheeks bright with relief. Jacob followed with deliberate steps, boots double knotted, a cardboard model jet tucked under his arm like a talisman. Titan approached, nose working, then offered a measured wag that unlocked Daniel's breath. Nathan stood there, shivering, unable to elaborate. Words would break if he pushed them too fast. Cassandra left, he managed at last. Voice without armor. I failed you. I failed them. I kept choosing fear and calling it wisdom. Daniel set a hand on his shoulder and stepped aside. Inside, warmth first, words after. Coats steamed along hooks. Gloves opened like starfish on the heater. Daniel guided them to the corner booth near the window, where cedar branches wrote cursive across the glass. Outside, flakes spun like blessings. Inside, someone tuned the radio to a low hymn. Ellen arrived with bowls of stew, sliced bread, and a plate of apple cake disguised as extra. Eat, then talk, she said, pouring coffee for Nathan the way towns pour mercy without tallying. Lily wrapped Titan's neck and whispered that she had told every classmate about the bravest dog in Oregon. Jacob saluted exactly as Daniel had taught, then placed the jet on the table. I brought runway lights, he added, revealing tea candles and a roll of tape. For landings at night. Daniel grinned, despite the ache. Then we will land straight. Only after the first spoonfuls did Nathan attempt a fuller apology. Words arrived unevenly, yet he forced them into daylight. He spoke about the shop, loans, pride dressed as certainty, the way Cassandra could turn anxiety into marching orders. He admitted to hearing the whisper in his head that said, control equals care. He named the silence he had offered when a brother needed a wall. He pushed the paper bag across the table. Inside lay the spare keys to Spokane, the watch Daniel had sold, and a note with 3 plain sentences. I was wrong. Forgive me. Teach me. Harold stamped snow from his boots and paused long enough to measure the moment. He slid a wool scarf across the table to Nathan. Folks worry about storms until they learn to dress for them. Sarah arrived with a library tote, cheeks flushed from the wind. She pulled out 2 paperbacks, crayons, a field guide to tracks, and 2 laminated cards that read Guest Reader. Tomorrow at 3, she told the children, bring a story and a brave voice. Redford did not interrogate arrivals. It handed them work worthy of staying. They ate. They breathed. Heat soaked into fingers. Jacob taped a landing strip along the bench and set candles where a pilot would want them. Lily drew Titan in a cape and titled it Daniel's Team. Nathan watched steam rise until his jaw loosened. She said I was choosing chaos, he murmured. Maybe I let fear of sinking drag all of us under water that hadn't risen yet. Brother, I'm sorry. Daniel met the offered hand. We all drown sometimes, he said. Tonight we build a dock. Ellen fetched a toolbox. Daniel installed 2 new pegs beside the other. Harper pegs, she declared. Rent is paid with broom duty and honest stories. Lily claimed, sweeping rights with a solemn ceremony. Jacob volunteered to stack plate. Nathan nodded through tears that ignored dignity, then asked for a dish rag and washed until the fabric warmed in his hands. After the cake, Daniel carried blankets upstairs for room 4. Floors creaked in friendly ways. The space smelled of lemon oil and paper. He retrieved a lamp from storage, unfolded a patchwork quilt stitched by the town's hands, and placed a pencil on the dresser beside a blank card standing like a tent. Write what you need, he told them. Leave it here, we'll try before breakfast. Lily printed hot chocolate. Jacob added, flashlight drills. Nathan wrote thank you and covered the words with his palm. Back downstairs, the bell chimed again. A plow driver bought coffee and left a voucher for breakfast for whichever kid wakes first. The pastor dropped wool socks and said nothing else. The mechanic promised chains, sized for a sedan, whose owner did not yet know he would need them. Gifts arrived disguised as errands so Pride could cross the room without limping. The radio played something gentle. Snow thinned to a sift. The diner glowed. Laughter floated from the back, where Lily interviewed Harold about cribbage tactics, and Jacob quizzed Ellen about the correct number of pancakes a hero should eat before dawn patrol. Nathan washed bowls until elbows shone, then dried everything twice because hands need work while hearts relearn trust. When the last chair was placed on the table, and the register clicked goodnight, Ellen handed Nathan a key on a red tag. Up the stairs, she said. Turn left. Count 2 doors. Turn the knob like you're speaking politely to an old friend. She eyed the children. Quiet feet after 9. Loud gratitude any time. Nathan swallowed. We won't waste this. You'll grow it, she corrected. They climbed together. At the landing, Daniel paused beside room 3, slid the folded flag from its drawer, and moved it to a shelf between the 2 doors. No explanation was needed. The children saluted without prompting. Titan stretched, sighed, and settled across the threshold like a bridge laid down between yesterday and tomorrow. Daniel lingered on the stairs, listening to wind rise and laughter soften, listening to timber make the small ticks of a building welcoming new way. He understood that home is not a prize, it is a practice. Redford had taught him to place small anchors, a peg, a lamp, a list, a story at the right hour. Tonight, it added another. Family returned without any demand for payment beyond humility and work. He stepped back into the dining room, turned off all but one lamp, and stood in the warm pool of light with Titan leaning into his knee. The town hummed beyond the windows. A truck downshifted somewhere far off. Snow polished the street to porcelain, the sign steady. This story is for anyone chasing hope across winter roads, for travelers who carry scars like maps, for parents who need one more chance to show children how courage sounds when it whispers. Please share it with someone who needs steady light tonight. Write amen in the comments if you believe in second chances. Subscribe for more tales of courage and loyalty. Where are you from? Tell us below, dear friend.